Fun Ideas Productions presents the Fun Ideas Podcast.
We see the syphilitic shrinking obelisk, the white man's wilting dick. We see through dangling jowls of seedy game show trolls the smiling lie of the televised hive. The witches are watching with their thousand eyes. Witches are watching with their thousand eyes. We smell rotten teeth that speak beyond belief. A stick inside their skull.
Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and welcome to Fun Ideas Podcast number 70. This episode is sponsored by the fine folks at Lee's Comics. Attention comic book fans, Lee's Comics in Mountain View, California has closed. But here's the good news. Lee's Comics eBay store is still going strong with over 10,000 vintage comics, the majority of which are now on sale, for half off. Choose from Lee's huge stock of golden, silver, bronze, and modern age comics, and specializing in Silver Age Marvel titles. You can count on friendly service, accurate grading, and quick, secure shipping backed by a money-back guarantee. To check out Lee's eBay store, go to eBay. Click Advanced Search to the left of the search bar, scroll down to Sellers, and enter Lee's Comics Inc., period. That's LeesComics, period. Don't forget the period. Lee's Comics is shipping daily with no delays. New items daily. Mention the Fun Ideas Podcast and get a free bonus gift. Here are some recent comments about this podcast, and I really appreciate the kind words. Tom on YouTube says, "Amazing content. You deserve more subscribers." I agree. I usually push subscribing to YouTube or Podomatic when I upload or at the end of this show. But on YouTube, I currently have a little over 100 subscribers, and YouTube starts paying creators once they reach the 1,000 subscriber mark. So, do me a favor, tell your friends about the Fun Ideas Podcast, and get them to subscribe too. It's just a click of a button on my YouTube page. Also, I'd appreciate it if you became a Patreon of me. It does cost some money, mainly for storage space, to do this show, so if I could get at least $100 a month from outside sources, that will help defray some of the costs in doing it. Of course, you can advertise like Lee's Comics does. Rates are low, and they run for the entire season. Contact me at funideas.mark@gmail.com if interested. As far as Fun Ideas Productions is concerned, I'm doing well during the pandemic, and I'm working on the Mad book and on the new Disney book, and 4 articles for Back Issue magazine. Headquartered, the book about the monkey solo years that I wrote with Michael A. Ventrella is my latest book, and look for the Warren Kremer book and the TTV scrapbook soon. Of course, I'm continuing this podcast during the summer for now, so I will be doing that as well. Our guest today is a world-renowned caricaturist, with his work appearing in comic books such as Married with Children, then later in Cracked magazine, and then, for the past 20 years, in Mad magazine. Here he is, Tom Richmond. Okay, on the phone today I have Tom Richmond. How are you today?
I'm great, Mark. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you very much. Always like to start off with just a general question. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became an artist or a caricaturist, whatever you prefer.
Well, I started out doing caricatures as a summer job while I was going to college, when I was going to art school in Minnesota, and I got a job doing caricatures at a theme park. It was a summer gig for the whole time I was going through college, and kind of discovered that caricature was something I kind of had a knack for, was something I really enjoyed, and ended up becoming a main focus on, what I eventually went to do, published work and freelancing. Caricature was a big part of that.
Mm-hmm. Did you have in your classes any training to do that, or is it just something that you just had the knack for?
No, I never. I got zero training in cartooning or caricature in college, sadly. The schools I went to had no programs that had any cartooning, which was, good and bad, because it was bad because I never got to, learn how to ink from anybody that knew what they were doing, or anything like that. But I did learn traditional art techniques and, good drawing and realistic type work, and I think that helped form my style of cartooning, which I did on my own. I learned a lot about caricature at that job. Mm-hmm. I worked with artists that have been doing caricatures for decades, and people that were airbrush t-shirt artists also, actually, and caricature artists, and so I was exposed to a lot of people's styles and different kinds of art that they did as well, and it was a kind of a secondary education there, but college was my realistic painting and drawing, and my summer job was cartooning.
Right. Now, I read, I think it was a bio on your website. It said it was Six Flags Great America in Illinois. I was just curious, did you do anything else there, or is art just the first love and the only thing you did when working at the theme park?
Yeah, just the caricatures.
Okay, I was just curious.
I never made cotton candy or pressing any of the buttons for the roller coasters to go.
Right.
It was an interesting job because I wasn't actually working for the theme park. The company that I worked for was a contractor there. So I worked for them, and they had a contract for the park. So we weren't technically employees of the theme park. We had to follow all their rules and everything, but we were sort of our own little entity. And it was a lot of fun. I'm still real good friends with some of those. My first summer was 1985, and I'm still good friends with a lot of the people that I worked with that summer, including a guy named Doug Mankey, who was an airbrush t-shirt artist that first year as well, and he's now a big name comic book artist for DC and does everything for him, and he's quite well known. But so it's pretty interesting job.
Yeah. How many years did you do that? About 2, or maybe less?
I did it 4 years for that. At that time, all the way through my college years. Then, when I graduated from school, I got a job. I was offered a management position with that same company, and they moved me and my new bride down to Atlanta. And we lived in Atlanta for 2 summers, and he opened up this company called Foz and Arts, opened I think a caricature concession at Six Flags in Atlanta, and I ran it, trained all the artists, and did all that stuff for 2 years, and then we got homesick, so we came running back to Minnesota, and then at that time I opened my own theme park operations and retail type operations, and I did it probably full time for, every summer anyway, 20 years maybe.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, I was still doing live theme park caricatures during the summers when I started with MAD.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I never knew because, when I called you or talked to you before, it was mainly just for my cracked book. And obviously at that point you were already at MAD, so we talked about MAD, but I didn't really go any deeper because I didn't really need it for the purposes of the book. But on these podcasts, I always try to find out, other details about your career and things like that, if it's important or interesting or both or whatever.
Yeah, I still have live caricature operations here in Minnesota. There was a time when I had 7 operations in 4 different states.
Wow.
Yeah, I probably had 100 artists maybe working with me every summer. But that business has kind of gone downhill over the last decade or two. The theme parks, the regional type theme parks like the Six Flags parks that aren't, Disney or Universal in places like Florida or California, they've been catering to local people for years and season pass holders and things. And now the clientele that go to those parks not only are the numbers down a lot, but they are nothing but local people that have season passes and go there, 10 times a summer. They don't buy souvenirs, like caricatures. So that business is not what it used to be, that's for sure. But I still have a seasonal park here in Minnesota called Valley Fair. Been there since 1991. And I do them at the Nickelodeon Universe Park in the Mall of America. We've got a couple booths there, and I probably, during the summer, I have about a dozen artists that work with us, and I sometimes pop out there myself and do it. So
wow,
still kind of in my part of my world, but not quite as big a focus as it was back in the early 90s.
Right. Well, we'll touch on some other things, but you seem to be a pretty busy guy. I just thought, you're only mad, but, I guess I could touch on it now. It's like, I didn't know you were president of the National Cartoonist Society. Are you still?
No, I did 2 terms with them, and 2015 was the year that I ran my last Reuben Awards and then stepped down.
Oh, okay. Bill
Morrison became president after I left, and he was president for 4 years. And I was president for 2-year terms, and I ran 4 Reubens, and it was quite an undertaking. That was, but the Cartoonist Society was a big part. It has been a big help for me in my career, and I felt like I wanted to give back, and so it's a tough job because it's a lot of time and energy, but funny, no pay. So I'll volunteer.
Well, what do you do exactly other than have the title? I mean, I really don't know. So. You have to oversee the whole organization, but probably the biggest task is putting on the Reuben Awards, the weekend of the awards and the convention sort of thing that they do every year. And so you got to find a hotel and negotiate all that, and then get speakers and come up with sponsorship, and it's quite an undertaking. Mm-hmm. And didn't you win the Reuben yourself, like in 2011 or something like that?
I did. In fact, I won it the first year I was president. I wasn't nominated.
It's rigged.
Yeah, I know. We were. It was funny because I became president and I hadn't been nominated before, but when I became president, the previous president, Jeff Keane, said, we may have a situation where a sitting president is going to be nominated for the Reuben Award. And I'm like, you're kidding. And he goes, no, of course I wasn't privy to the numbers before I became president. He said, you've been very close to being nominated every year for the last several years, and you're probably going to get it pretty soon here. And then sure enough, I got it. I got nominated, and I thought, well, I'll never win. Like most of the time, you get nominated for this thing like 20 times before you really win it, But I won it the first year I was nominated, which was quite a surprise. And the people, the other past presidents and stuff had to step in and handle the Reuben nominations and awards part of it, at least for the Reuben, because they said you don't get to know if you won or not. So I was the only president in the history of the organization that had no idea who won the Reuben Award until it was announced at the dinner.
Wow, I didn't know it was such a, what's the word? I don't know, operation similar to like the Oscars, I didn't know, it was like you can't know ahead of time or anything like that.
Yeah, it's been around for a long time, and some of the winners are, guys like Charles Schultz and Milton Caniff and Rube Goldberg and Will Eisner. I mean, it's a pretty heady company.
Mm-hmm.
So it was awesome, and very humbling to have that. But it's all been downhill since then.
Now, in looking at your stuff, one thing I didn't know, and I was reading these, I guess I didn't know your name then. When you got started in the comic book field, as it were, you started with Married with Children comics for Now Comics?
Yeah, it was like my first published job. Well, sort of. I had done a couple little freelance things here and there before that, but it was really my first, certainly my first comic book work, but that was in 91, I think. Yeah, so it was right after I got out of college. In fact, I started drawing that after I moved to Atlanta for that caricature gig down there. So I guess it would have been 89. And I did 22 issues of that comic, I think, for that.
I think I remember now looking back on it because I don't have them accessible right at the moment, so I can't pull them out. But I go, I know I liked your artwork, but I didn't pay attention to credits so much maybe back then. So that's what it was. But then there was a surprise. I go, oh, that's probably why I like those comics, even though I did like the TV show anyway and stuff like that.
Well, I got to tell you, looking back at that stuff, and of course, as an artist, hopefully you continuously progress in your skill set, but I can't believe I got that job. I can't believe that they paid me to do that horrible art, because it was pretty bad. I was like 19 years old, and I didn't really have, I guess I would have been in my early 20s, but I look back at it now and go, oh my God, and it's just terrible.
Were you hired on that because you were a caricaturist, or you just happened to be in the right place at the right time?
Well, a little bit of both. The comic book itself was licensed, so it was officially licensed adaptation of Married with Children, and they had more of a cartoony approach, almost an animated sort of look to the first few issues. I started with issue number 6 of the first run, and the previous artists, Now Comics had a lot of problems. Like, they weren't very good at paying people, and their books were continuously late, and they did not have a good reputation in the comic book industry. So the original artist on that, and boy, his name is escaping me right now, he quit. Like, he's like, I'm not doing any more work until you pay me. Well, then they started going out to find other people that maybe wouldn't be so worried about getting paid. So, of course, I didn't know that at the time. I just saw an ad in CBG for that Now Comics had put out, saying that they were looking for artists for some of their titles, and I did a little mini story that I wrote with caricatures of the Bundys running around in their house, and I got the job as penciler, and a lot of people got stiffed by Now Comics, but I worked for them for a long time, and there were only 6 pages of penciled work that I didn't get paid for, and that was for an issue that never got published. Oh. So I sort of escaped less burned than some other people did. But I think I got the job because, one, they did want somebody that could get halfway decent likenesses of the actors, and also it was a time when there were a lot of comics titles out there and a lot of work to go around, and not as many artists capable of doing it. And Now had a bad reputation, and I was like, I was paying my bills with the theme park biz, so I wasn't too worried about making sure that I was getting steady paychecks. I could afford to wait, for a month or two to get paid if I had to. I just wanted to get some work out there. So, it was sort of a confluence of things that came together that ended up being able to do that job.
And were you a fan of the show? I mean, most people were, but some people weren't aware of it. Were you a fan of the show at the time, or did you have to kind of watch episodes and kind of learn it?
Oh, no, I'd seen it. It was a pretty popular show. Right. And it was very funny. It was kind of a groundbreaking series at the time. I had watched it, so I was very familiar with the show. Interestingly enough, likenesses of the actors. They were Columbia Pictures was, where they licensed it from, and they had the right to, review the art and stuff. So they seemed to be a lot more accepting of caricatures of Ed O'Neill and whatever the guy's name who played Bud Bundy was, the boy.
Right.
Than they were the ladies. Christina Applegate and Katie Seagal caricatures, they were constantly telling me I had to make Katie Seagal's nose smaller and all this stuff. So I ended up really just doing sort of half-ass cartoon versions of those two and doing a little bit more of a real caricature of the guys in the show. So, but, whatever. It is what it is.
Interesting. During the time of doing it, did you ever meet the cast or anything like that, or are you just kind of separate in your own world doing these things?
Yeah, I did meet Ed O'Neill, but not. It was just sort of a happenstance thing. He was promoting the syndication of the show, and he had an appearance at the Minnesota State Fair. And I found out he was going to be there, and I was like, I should go meet him. So we went out there, and it was just a fan thing, and he was there signing autographs, and I brought a couple copies of the comic with me. I was hoping I could get him to sign them for me, and one of his handlers saw me holding the comics, and he said, there's a guy that works on the show that brings these in every time they're published. Everybody loves them. And I said, well, I'm the artist. And he goes, really? Oh, well, hang back, and I'll have you meet Ed afterwards. So I actually met him, in the backstage area or whatever, and I got him to sign those things for me. He was really nice, but it was very surreal meeting somebody that I had drawn like that much in the comics and actually meeting him in person. It was really. I kind of stared at his face a lot. I'm sure he was very uncomfortable for it. I kept kind of looking at him kind of sideways. I go, oh, okay. Did
he critique your work? It's like you.
He told me that they all loved the fact that they were in comics.
Okay.
He was nothing but complimentary about the.
You drew me with too big a nose.
Yeah, no, he had no problem with that. I didn't realize how big that guy is. Like he's a big dude, like a football player big.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I've never met any of the cast of that show.
Yeah, so. He was just a lot bigger than I thought he was. Katie Seagal's a pretty tall lady too, I guess, because of course she wears like 10-inch heels on that show too. So, and her hair is another 10 inches tall, so she makes him look small. But he was probably about I think he was probably like 6'3", 6'4", and I bet he went 250 or something. He was a big dude. That shocked me. I didn't see that coming.
Right. And I assume, just on the same vein of meeting celebrities, you've probably met many celebrities over the years since you've done the caricatures for Cracked and Mad and things like that, right?
Hardly any.
Really? Oh.
Yeah.
Huh.
I very seldom do I end up meeting anybody that I have actually drawn in the magazine. I sometimes hear from them.
Okay.
And especially like the creators of shows and movies, like producers or writers or people like that, they tend to be a lot more enthusiastic about having had whatever they created been spoofed and mad than like the actors are.
Right.
Yeah, like I've got a lot of splash pages hanging in my studio that were signed by the cast of the show or the cast of the movie, but mostly because one of the producers was a huge Mad fan and called me and wanted to buy the art or whatever, and I would say, well, if I send a oversized print of the splash, can I get some signatures on it? So,
cool.
And then I would get them back in the mail, and so I've got my splash page from the TV show Lost. Signed by the whole cast. J.J. Abrams is a huge Mad fan. And Chuck Lorre is a huge Mad fan. Anytime we do an Abrams movie or a TV show or a Chuck Lorre movie or a Chuck Lorre TV show, he buys all the artwork. They buy all the art.
Oh, wow.
Really think it's cool. So I've got the Big Bang Theory splash page signed by everybody. 2.5 Men. That's another Chuck Lorre show.
I guess I must have seen one of these on your website or something. That's probably why I thought you were meeting these people. I didn't realize it was done through the mails in such a way. So,
mostly, I did meet a couple of the people from Lost because they were at a Comic-Con in San Diego, and I brought this print with me, and I kind of got through the back door on that one because I had mentioned to JJ that I was going to be there, and he's like, oh well, just go up and talk to. Gave me the name of somebody who was, one of their handlers, and said, tell him that you want to get this signed by some of the cast, and so I went up, and so I met the guy who played Sawyer, Maggie Grace, and a couple of the writers, Damon Lindenhoff, signed it. I met him too, and he ended up actually having me print out a ton of those splash pages and send to him because he gave them to all the cast members, which was kind of cool.
I guess I'll jump ahead because I know this is kind of related. And when I interviewed Bill Morrison a few weeks ago, he touched upon it as one of the last projects he worked on when he was at MAD. You worked on the TV guide and the MAD covers, among other things, for Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. How did that come about, or what's your recollection about it? He told me his side of the story, but he said, this is Bill, he said, Tom has more of the story on this. And I go, okay.
Yeah. Well, it actually all happened outside of MAD. Bill and MAD got brought in later on it. But what happened was I got contacted by a guy named Chris Call, who was the prop master for the movie, and he sent me an email, and he had been doing some web searches for an artist that he thought could reproduce a TV guide cover that would look like a 60s TV guide cover. Right. He was specific, and he was looking for somebody to basically do a Jack Davis job on it. And so he said, would you be interested in doing that? And I was like, of course. I'm a huge Tarantino fan. And so he explained, well, the whole concept here is this is going to be a prop that's going to be hanging in this character's house in a scene, and the purpose of it is we're supposed to be showing how famous this show was years earlier. So we need a 60s era TV guide cover to show that. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. It'd be great. I said, I'm an artist for Mad Magazine. He goes, oh, yeah, I did read that. He says, that's really cool. I said, yeah, you should have a Mad Magazine cover from the 60s if it was that popular a show. And he was like, yeah, we should have a Mad Magazine cover. So he pitched that to Quentin, who flipped out because he was a really big Mad fan from way back. And so we ended up having to bring Mad in because, of course, they have to, get the rights to show the logo and all that kind of stuff. So it actually got sort of half art directed by Mad and half art directed by Tarantino. I remember Bill telling me that he almost nixed it.
Yeah. He said that. Yeah. He said, he was kind of disinterested. Maybe he was saying by his own admission he had a lot of stuff going on around that time, and it was just not a high priority for him.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad he didn't, because it ended up being a lot of fun, and it actually got a pretty good shot in the movie, the Mad cover.
Yeah.
The TV guide covers just got like a blip, just a second.
Right.
But there's like 2 or 3 seconds where, I'm sorry, man. 2 or 3 seconds where it,
Call from.
Sorry about that. I forgot to turn off my phone. I'll have to edit this out.
That's okay.
Just threw it out the door, so it won't do that again. So we ended up, doing both covers, and they got a lot of screen time, or at least the Mad cover did, which was really cool. and I got to deliver the originals to the set and meet Tarantino.
Oh, cool.
Which was really cool. I didn't meet any of the other actors because at the time they were filming some exterior shots of like cars coming down the Hollywood Hills or whatever, and so it was all outdoor, late night sort of thing. And but I got to meet and gave the art to Tarantino. The originals were part of the deal, and we chatted about Mad and how big of a fan he was and how cool he was, how excited he was when Pulp Fiction got parodied in the magazine. And yeah, but he was great. And we talked a lot about Jack Davis. He was a huge Jack Davis nut, and I definitely channeled Jack in the artwork.
Right.
Like, you know, my own style has got some Jack Davis, you know, flavor to it maybe, but and you know, some of the other classic Mad artists, but it's it's not. I definitely did more of a homage to Jack.
I could definitely tell the difference. You know, at first glance, you just go, "Wow, Jack Davis did a cover that I never saw before." Oh, wait.
Yeah,
I actually knew because I know your artwork, but you know, it's like I was like impressed that it got in the film. Now, did they give you photo references of like Leonardo DiCaprio and things like that so you could work with it, or did you just use your own photo references?
No, they sent me a bunch of stills from the movie. They did like promotion. They must have had a promotional photo shoot or something where he was in costume and he was on a horse and he was doing all this stuff, and pictures of him just standing there as Jake Cahill so interest. You know, I'm not very involved with the movie business, but you can tell how paranoid filmmakers are about things getting leaked, because every single one of those photos had my name superimposed across it in a huge diagonal.
Wow.
And so, you know, all the reference I was working on had my name over top of DiCaprio's face, but just so that I couldn't post it online. But yeah, it was a really fun, interesting job. I was shocked at how involved Tarantino was personally on this stuff. I mean, he like described exactly what he wanted on each magazine cover, and you know, he was approving the artwork. And I mean, you'd think that something that was just going to hang on the wall in the middle of you know, for 1 second in one scene would not take up that much of his time and energy, but it's amazing.
Yeah, you never know what movie directors will do. Like, you know, Titanic by James Cameron. He was so thorough that every plate that ultimately got destroyed in the film had to have a little white star or blue star on it, you know, whatever. That was the actual logo, you know, to make it authentic looking. And it's like, geez, these plates are getting broken and are only on there for a split second. But, you know, they like the details, so...
Yeah. Well, of course, he's, you know, obsessed with details and the period and everything, and it was, you know, there's no detail too small for to get accurate with his period type pieces. So yeah, that was a very cool, very fun job.
Now, I read you did, or wasn't there like a second Mad cover? It was like an insert for the 4K edition of the DVD, as it were.
Yeah, there's actually like a whole nother part to that story, because when I was visiting the set and talking to Tarantino, he said, you know what would be really cool is if Mad did a parody of Bounty Law, which is the fake TV show, or the fictional TV show from the movie, and we could like tie it into the movie. And I was like, yeah, that would be really cool. You should pitch that to Mad. Well, they did pitch it to Mad, and we did that. So in Mad number 9, which came out the same month that the movie came out, we did a 6-page parody of the TV show, and it was done in such a way that they had sort of pretended that it had never been printed, but it was done back in the 60s.
Right.
So the whole first 10 pages of this, or 12 pages of this issue of Mad, it looks like a 60s Mad, like the old 60s table of contents and the old pasted up words. And, they even did some, Susie Hutchinson, the art director, and the production people put a yellow kind of brown tint to the outside of the pages, like, it's an old weathered issue, and they used the cover that was in the movie. They used my cover for that cover. So we did this 6-page black and white parody, and then they contacted us again later and said, we'd like to do a little mini version of Mad with a completely new parody of the show for the special edition Blu-ray package. So we did a whole nother parody of the show, written by the same guy, Andrew Secunda, and I did all the art, and I did a new cover, and it's just this little 5-inch by 7-inch little mini Mad that is in that package, and that was really cool too. A little bit different because we're working on much smaller pages, so it's only like 1 or 2 panels per page and a lot of 2-page spreads. So I think it was 22 or 24 pages total of the little pages, which ended up being about the same length as a 6-page full parody. But so I got to do it a second time.
Wow, I didn't know it was that different. I knew the cover was different, so I'm still seeking it out. I'll probably have to order it online because I've not seen it in any stores. So
good luck with that. Because they only made a few of them. I think Mad sent me like six copies of the actual little booklet. And my kids all confiscated them. I've got 4 kids, so I've only got 2 left. And I called Mad up and I said, "Hey, can I get a few more copies of that?" Because they're like, "I wish we could because we don't have any."
Oh boy!
So it's like it's tough to find, but it was fun. It was really enjoyable to duplicate the old 60s style of art. I kind of I used a duo shade technique, but I did it digitally. The old-fashioned duo shade type thing,
and that parody you were kind of emulating more Mort Drucker than Jack Davis.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot more Mort, like especially the hands, and I did like more Mort-like hands than I would typically do, and because again they wanted this sort of 60s look, and I did a lot more brush work actually with the inking than I usually do too. Which Mort doesn't use a brush, but his stuff looks brushy because he uses a big nib. And so I tried to get that look as close as I could, and the duotone shade type shading really helped with that. And it was pretty cool.
Is it difficult to emulate somebody else's style? I know Bill Elder used to do it all the time in Mad way back when, and so it's not impossible. But for you, is it hard to draw like Jack Davis even for one image?
No, it's pretty easy.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean they have signature elements. Everybody's got signature elements to their style, and you just have to identify what those are and use them. So Jack is a lot zanier than Mort. He has a lot longer figures, and he's got those crazy feet that he draws on everybody, and Mort's stuff is a lot more realistic bend to it, but he uses a lot of curly cues with his inking and certain conventions that and then you just like Mort's hands are very identifiable, and so I just kept those elements kind of in place. And but I've had to do that a number of times over my career, is emulate, because when I parody something, if it's a comic or some kind of art, then I have to get that look. So in Mad, a couple of times I did some Family Circus spoofs, where one of them was the Honey Boo Boo Family Circus,
right?
And another one was the Bush Family Circus. Or no, not the Bush Family Circus, the Trump Family Circus. And so I had to do the Bill Keane style, but do caricatures of people, that was quite interesting to try to meld those two worlds together. And I'm real good friends with Jeff Keane, who does the Family Circus now, Bill's son. He's been doing it for 20 years. And so I called Jeff up and I said, "Hey, what kind of a brush do you use when you ink?" And he says, "I use a number 3. Why would you ask that?" And I'm like, "Oh, no reason. Just was kind of curious." And then I didn't tell him that this was coming out. And then when the issue came out, I sent him the copy with all the original art. But yeah, it was pretty funny. So yeah, I mean, and I've done these kids books too that Matt did for a while. We did 3 different kids book parodies that were kind of, one of them, the Goodnight Batcave book didn't emulate the art from Goodnight Moon, because that would have been, I couldn't have done Batman in that style. Yeah. But we emulated like the color schemes and the layouts and that type of thing. But the Penguin book, the Don't Let the Penguin Drive the Batmobile, that's Mo Willems style art. I had to look at his stuff and figure out what makes it tick. And Ray Cruz's art style from the Alexander and the Horrible, Rotten, No Good, Really Bad Day book.
Right.
That we did Superman and the Miserable, Rotten, No Fun, Really Bad Day.
Right.
That's super intricate cross hatching and kind of the weird character designs and everything. So it's not my favorite thing in the world to do is do that. But when you're trying to do a successful parody of a comic or a cartoon or an art style, that's important. Who another person who was really good at that was Bob Clark. Mm-hmm. He did a lot of that. Anytime Mad had to do like comic strip spoofs or whatever, Bob would do it, and he could nail those styles just effortlessly. Yeah.
He was also good at drawing like packaging, like an Ajax can or something, which seems like how boring, but it's like it was good, because it was good that you had some guy at Mad like that. You couldn't have, say, Don Martin drawing a can like that or something.
Yeah, and even guys like Jack Davis, his style was just too identifiable, and he did what he did, and guys like Bob Clark were like chameleons they had their own style, but they were able to do other people's styles too, and you had to do that. If you're going to do an ad parody, it had to look like the ad you were spoofing, otherwise it didn't work. Yeah. So and I sort of inherited that thing from Mad. I ended up becoming the guy who did a lot of that stuff.
So I've asked this before, you told the story before, but it's still a fun story. Prior to Mad, you worked at Cracked, and tell us how you got the job at Cracked. But then the story I always like to hear, because it's a good story, is just how you got the job at Mad after working for Cracked for about a year or so.
Yeah, well, I started at Cracked right at the time that American Media bought it through osmosis, and you told that story in your books, quite well. But in the short version is that American Media, which owned the Weekly World News, bought the company that owned the National Enquirer, which also owned Cracked. And the American Media people didn't think they wanted to continue to publish Cracked. It wasn't really making any money, and so there was an art director or an editor there named Dick Culpa, who was a cartoonist, who said, "I'll save Crack Magazine." And so he took it over. Well, of course, the first thing they did was cut the page rate to 0. Not quite 0, but pretty close to 0. Yeah. And, all the, like John Severin and Wally Brogan and Art Bollinger and all these guys that were mainstays at Cracked were like, "We're not working for this." Yeah. So they lost all their artists. So he had to call out for artists willing to do work for dirt cheap, and mainly just to get your artwork out there, which is a terrible thing. But at the time I was so this was probably 1999 or 2000, roughly. And I was, had just got done doing the Married with Children and other comic book work, and I was looking for something that was a little bit more caricature-y and in that style. And so I sent them some stuff, and ended up doing 4 parodies for them over the course of 4 issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Cracked had its problems and all this type of thing, but it was fun. I mean, I got to do a couple of movies. I actually wrote and drew the Godzilla parody. That was my first parody, the Matthew Broderick Godzilla. I wrote and drew that. Wrote it myself, and I had done it to show Sam Viviano, the newly minted art director at MAD, some work. So I wrote and drew my own parody and showed it to him, and he was like, oh, well, it's pretty good. I like some stuff about your work. You need to keep growing. And what I later learned was that he thought my work was too much like Mark Drucker's. I was emulating his style too much, and Mad was famous for not hiring people who looked, who were too close to the style of some of their more famous artists. So
right.
if your stuff looked like Jack Davis's, like there were a lot of Jack Davis ripoff artists out there, Mad would not, give you any work.
Yeah.
So he said, look, your stuff isn't exactly like Mort's at all. You're not a ripoff artist, but it's too heavily influenced by him. You really need to...
Well, at the time, were they really hiring at that time yet, or no?
Well, it was a transitional period for Mad at that time, because they were, at that point, looking to switch to color.
Hmm.
And that was presenting problems, because Mort did not want to work in color.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to color his parodies, and he refused to allow anybody to color his parodies.
Hmm.
So they were like, well, wait a minute, we can't, if we're going to switch to a color magazine, we can't have, keep going with black and white movie parodies, and those have got to be in color. So anyway, but I showed that Godzilla piece to Sam, and he's, gave me some pointers, but basically said, keep sending me stuff.
Yeah.
And then I found out about this call from Crack magazine for new artists, and I sent the stuff to Crack. Well, they immediately published it. It was like a two-year-old movie, but I didn't care. So I had to finish it. I didn't have the last page done, so I rewrote the last page and and finished it and sent it to them. And they published it in, I can't remember what issue number it was. Yeah. And then they said, well, let's do another one. So I wrote a Sopranos parody. That was really big at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And a buddy of mine helped punch up the gags, and so he was a co-writer. And they published that one. And then I worked with Barry Dutter, the writer, on a parody of the X-Men, the first X-Men movie, and Gladiator, which was the last movie I did for them. And Barry was great. I was doing like everything. I was doing the word balloons, the paste up, the layouts.
Wow.
And I was sending camera-ready art to Kraft.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, they had a color section of the magazine, a couple of pages in the middle that were color, and the X-Men parody I did in color. And then I was supposed to do the Gladiator parody in color, and I did this at the time was like a really crazy splash page for me. It was a big gladiator scene with, in the arena, and there are tigers all over the place, and, all the characters are in it, and there's all this action going on, and it took me forever to draw, and it took me forever to color. And I had was finished coloring it when I got a call from Barry, and they said, we're bumping it from the color section, and it's just going to be in black and white.
Oh, jeez.
And I was pretty mad, because it probably spent maybe a whole day coloring that thing, maybe longer. I mean, it was a big, meticulous scene. And I said, well, what are you replacing it with? And they said, Dick really wants to do this movie, thinks it's going to be really big. Battlefield Earth.
I remember that now, though.
Yeah, and I was like, okay. So I was really mad at everybody at Cracked, and I was kind of fed up with them anyway. So that Gladiator parody had come out, and right exactly at that time was the Rubin Awards, NCS Rubin Awards, and this time it was in New York, and I had just become a member the year before. So I went there, and they had a big Mad panel, and Sam was there, and Nick Beglin, and I showed him the Gladiator parody. And I had been sending my stuff to Sam every time I get done doing a parody for Cracked. I'd send it to Sam, and he'd get back to me and say, "Yeah, things are looking good." Well, I finally showed him this Gladiator parody, and he and Nick took me aside and said, "Well, this is exactly what we wanted to see. Your work has really progressed, and you've got your own voice now, and I think we'd love to have you work for Mad, but there's a problem. Like, you can't have a byline in Mad magazine and Cracked magazine at the same time." And I said, "Yeah, that's okay. That's no problem. I don't work for Cracked anymore." And they were like, "When did that happen?" And I said, 3 seconds ago.
That's the story I love.
Yeah, and Sam says, "Oh, wait a minute now. I can't promise you when I'm going to be able to give you any work. It might not be for a year." And I said, "That's okay." I didn't tell them the story about how they bumped me from the color section and wasted all my time, but or the fact that I was getting paid hardly anything to do that stuff. I was done with Cracked either way at that point.
Yeah.
So it just was what it was. And, but I didn't have to wait too long. It was only like another month later that Sam called me and had me do a piece. So.
Do you remember what the first piece was for Mad?
Yeah, it actually, what they used to do at that time, because Mad was still pretty intact, at the end of the 90s. Mort was still going strong. Angela Torres was still going strong. Of course, Sergio's still there, and Al Jaffe's still there, but they still had a lot of artists there that are either gone now or whatever. Dave Berg was still doing his thing. It was still Mad. It was still black and white.
Right.
And they had me do what they would do with new people, especially new writers and artists, is they would do what they called not really a test piece, but they do what they called an evergreen piece. So it was something that didn't necessarily need to be published anytime soon, because whatever the subject matter was evergreen, you know. And this one was something about cable TV. It was called Mad's Cable TV Betting Odds. And it was little gags about the different cable networks like Lifetime and MTV and that sort of thing. So it was like a 3-pager. And Sam said, "Well, we'll give it to you." And it was sort of like a trial piece. So if you did it and they liked what you did, you'd get another piece, down the road. But if they didn't like it, or it just didn't turn out, they could bump it, and you still got paid. You got paid on delivery at Mad, not on publication. But this is what happened with this piece. I did it. It was June of 2000, I think. And Sam said it was supposed to be in the next issue. And I got it done and turned it in. He says, "Well, we do like it." He says, we think it turned out great, but we're bumping it from this issue because there's a timelier piece that we'd like to put in, but don't worry, this will see print. We just don't know when." And I'm like, "And we'll call you for another job soon." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Well, then they didn't call me, and July went by, and they didn't call me, and August was going by, and they didn't call me. And I thought, shoot, I blew it. I had my chance to do it for Mad, and they must not have liked what I sent in or something. So then I got a call from them, though, in August, and they were doing some website stuff, and they had me do a couple of emergency pieces for their website. And then I got another job for print, and this one ended up in the next issue, and that was issue 399. It was the very last full black and white old paper stock issue.
Wow.
399. And the piece was called "How to Make Your Home Theater Look More Like Going to the Movies." And it was written by Dick DiBertolo, and it was a 2-page spread. And that was my first published piece in Mad. That other piece I did ended up in an issue the next year. like 5 or 6 issues later. So it did see print, but I was like almost a year later.
I thought you were going to say 21 years later, it's still not in print.
No,
but I got paid.
and I had done several other pieces for him by then, including a movie and a TV parody. So,
What was your first movie or TV parody then? What do you remember?
My first parody was a TV show, and it was Malcolm in the Middle.
Oh, okay.
And then the next issue, I did a movie parody. That was my first movie parody, and that was the movie Traffic with Michael Douglas and Benicio del Toro and Don Cheadle. So I started doing TV and movie parodies almost right away. It was just a couple of issues that I did some like spot stuff and everything, and then started in with the parodies, and eventually that's almost all I did for a long time. Every once in a while I do a different piece, but it was, Mort, like I said, Mort didn't want to color his stuff, and he wouldn't let anybody color his work. So they were kind of stuck. Anytime they wanted to do a parody, it had to be black and white, and the magazine's in color now. So they had me doing my own color work, and Herman Mejia was doing his own color work. Angelo Torres was still doing parodies, but they had a color company color his stuff. He didn't mind that, but Mort refused to let him do it. In fact, there was one parody. Mort did a parody of the TV show 24, and Mad finally convinced him. I heard this story secondhand, of course, so I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but my understanding was Mad convinced Mort to let them try to color one of his pieces, and if he didn't like it, they wouldn't run it in color. They'd run it in black and white. And this was the piece 24, and so they ran it, or they showed him the color stuff. Mort said, "Nope, you're not running this in color." So they said, "Okay." So they switched it to grayscale, which doesn't exactly work, very well. And they showed him the grayscale version, and this time it was really close to press time. And he said, "You're not running it in gray like that either, and I don't have time to do my washes and all that stuff on top of it right now." So they ran it with the grayscale, but with a alias. So it's very clearly Mort Drucker's work, but the artist credited is named Bob Julian.
Oh, wow. I'll have to go back and look at these.
Yeah, and I don't remember what issue number it was, but it's whatever was the TV show 24 with Kiefer Sutherland. And, you can't mistake Mort's work, but it's credited to Bob Julian, and the grayscale stuff does look pretty lousy, I think.
Now, I could have gone to Doug Guilford's Mad site, which I'm sure you reference yourself, but I figured I'd ask you on first appearances and things. Does he talk about this on his page, or do you know that Julian got credit for Drucker's work?
I don't know if he does on his credits for that. I know it's credited to Bob Julian.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
But I don't know if he has the story about that on there. I'm not sure that's, story is even supposed to be out there. But I guess it is now.
The scoop is here. I don't think it's that harmful. I mean, since you're talking about Drucker, I mean, I thought I saw some color ones later. Did he finally acquiesce to it, or did they just say, sorry, Mort, we're colorizing it no matter what?
No. None of Mort's parodies were ever colorized.
Oh, really?
And in fact, you won't see any of his work colorized in any of the reprints either. I think he had an agreement of some kind with Mad that they would not colorize his work.
Interesting.
I don't know that for sure, but that was what I was told. And of course, Mort did his own color work. He did many color covers.
But also, you did color comic books in the past. Abbott and Costello, and I think he did Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis and a few others. And it's like, why was he so adverse to black and white? I mean, to color? Was it just because he was traditional and it's like, Mad is black and white? I don't like this color nonsense.
I don't know the answer to that. You'd have to ask Mort.
Okay.
Clearly he did, comic book work. He was DC Comics bullpen guy for like a long time, where he fixed and did all sorts of artwork and War Comics and the Bob Hope stuff, and that obviously got colored.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's
Interesting.
just something that he didn't like to have done.
Anyway, interesting. So, did he make any? It's like when you read this stuff. See, like as a fan, it's like, as I saw it, you just kind of were at Cracked for a bit, and then suddenly you're at Mad, and actually I was very happy about that because I thought Cracked was going away anyway. So it's like at least you found a place to land. It didn't seem like there was a gap or anything like that, and then it seemed like you immediately took over for Drucker, but it wasn't really the case.
No, he drew. He was still drawing parodies into the mid 2000s. Like, I can't remember what his last ones were. I know he did the movie 300.
Yeah.
And I guess, I'm not sure why he stepped away really from doing it in Mad. I don't know whether he just got, he just decided to sort of not work as hard, because these are a lot of work, man. Let me tell you, one of those parodies, that's a ton of work. Or he had other things going, or, maybe when Nick Meglin left, that might have had something to do with it. That's another question for Mort.
Right. Or age. I mean, he's in his 90s now, so I know.
Yeah. Well, certainly now, but he was still, doing work. He was doing ad work and other kinds of work back then. And I don't know. I know Jack Davis stopped working for Mad because he thought the magazine was getting too racy.
Yeah.
He told me that. He said, if my grandkids can't read it, then I don't want to be in it.
Yeah.
Is what he told me.
The story I know, and it seems true, I didn't hear it directly from Jack Davis, is that the last straw for him, although he appeared a couple times afterwards, but the last straw for him was when he had to do the Howard Stern cover where Alfred's plunging him out of the toilet. And he thought that was in poor taste, but he did the cover anyway.
Yeah, that sounds right. Jack was an old-fashioned Southern gentleman, and I guess it's funny that he would have a problem with that and not have a problem drawing people being beheaded and, all the gruesome stuff he did for EC back in the day.
Right. But he might have, both of them might have been coming up with excuses just to retire just kind of gracefully or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But do you ever talk to Mort or anything nowadays, or did you talk to him even when you were working with him?
Yeah, Mort was one of the biggest reasons I got into Mad. He sponsored me for membership in the Cartoonist Society, and he encouraged me to send my work to Mad, and I've met him many times. And when I was president of the Cartoonist Society, we created a new award called the Medal of Honor, which was something that it was sort of like a Lifetime Achievement Award, but we already had a Lifetime Achievement Award, the Milton Caniff Award, but that award was specifically for people that had not won a Reuben. So it was sort of a de facto way to honor a cartoonist who just had never won the Reuben Award during their main careers. And of course, the Reuben Award is supposed to be to honor somebody for the work that they had done that year, like Cartoonist of the Year. And but it had sort of become a bit of a Lifetime Achievement Award because they gave it to Will Eisner well after Will Eisner was long past doing The Spirit and everything.
Right.
And I felt like, wow, we really should have a Lifetime Achievement Award for people that have won the Reuben. I mean, it seems silly that you can't be honored with the Milton Caniff Award because you've already won an award that was supposed to be just for 1 year's worth of work.
Right. And
so the Medal of Honor was what we came up with, and Mort was the first recipient of it.
Very cool.
And that was in D.C. in 2015, my last year as president, and that was very special for me because here's a guy that inspired me and was a huge part of the reason I do what I do, and I was able to help give him a real big honor that he he deserved greatly. So I haven't talked to him in a while, but we sort of keep in touch here and there.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's good. There's like camaraderie there among caricaturists and stuff like that. You always wonder if of course, this isn't the case. If Mort had any sort of bad feelings, what's this young upstart doing or something? It sounds like nothing of the sort. So, No,
I never got that sense from him or Angelo.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys were mainstays for decades and decades and decades with Mad, and Mad switched to color, and that wasn't something that they had any control over, and.
Mm-hmm.
That's part. Basically, the reason I got in was because I did my own color work, and I was able to do those parodies in color.
Mm-hmm.
And so I suppose it depends on what happens with Matt. I'll probably have to put up with some young whippersnapper coming in and stealing all my work.
Now, since you brought it up, and I said before we started, I was going to ask about. Obviously, Mad moved from New York to L.A., and then they started over as number one. We had Bill Morrison, which I recently interviewed, was editor for about the first 9 or 10 issues, and then unfortunately got dismissed, I'll put it that way. And now it's basically a reprint title, even though they proudly say 21% new material. And I noticed in the most recent issue, number 12, you do have something in there, but it's not like a TV or movie parody, so you're still doing work for them, correct?
Yeah, I just finished a piece for issue number 13, so I'll have something in there too.
Now, how's it working today? I mean, is it like one issue at a time? Like you don't know if you're going to have a job the next issue, or what?
Yeah, but it's always been like that.
Oh, okay.
Unless you do like Spy versus Spy,
mm-hmm.
Or a Mad Look At.
Mm-hmm.
If you're my type of artist for them, where they assign you something that a writer has written, you never know what you're going to do for the next issue. So, I mean, for the longest time, I did a movie or a TV parody in every issue,
mm-hmm.
but I had no idea what it was going to be, or and then some issues I did something different. I'm in actually have a pretty good streak going. I think I'm in like 63 issues in a row with this last issue, starting at like about 495 or something like that. But there were times where I didn't get a job. Mm-hmm. In the next issue. So it's always been like that. But now, because it's mostly reprint stuff, right? They say 20%, slightly over 20% new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? I mean, I did get a piece for the next issue, and it'll be in there. I don't know if I'll have a piece in number 14.
Mm-hmm. And do they talk about? I mean, the big announcement was about a year ago in July. So that it leaked out that Mad's ending. And they acted like it was all going to be all reprint, and that they're going to just do enough issues to run out everyone's subscription and be done. Now that's when it first started. I knew that wasn't really the case. They can't let Mad die completely like that. It's too much of a brand name. But do you see a longer future for Mad, or even coming back in a different way than it is now, or is this what we got?
I think this is what we've got for the foreseeable future.
Okay.
I mean, you never say never, but the print business is having real problems,
mm-hmm.
and it's been this way in comics for the longest time. Comic book companies don't make any money selling their comics. That's almost like a loss leader. They make all their money licensing the properties in the comics, the IP. So, movies and TV shows and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they only keep the comics going, I think, because they want to keep the IP fresh and, the storylines going and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mad doesn't really have any IP. There's no room. Spy versus Spy, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's it.
And
I
Alfred,
mean, most of everything else in there, and Alfred. Everything else is like making fun of pop culture, and you can't license that. So, I think that what they eventually decided on doing is, look, the only way that the only income Mad really makes is from actual sales of the magazine, and it's too expensive to produce. So we either have to stop producing it or we have to cut the expenses of producing it, and they chose the latter. And all the work that's been done for Mad, well, not all the work, but very close to all the work that's ever been done for Mad since the very beginning was all work for hire.
Yeah.
So every piece that's been in Mad, with very few exceptions, DC owns the copyrights to, and they can republish it ad nauseum with no further payments to the creators. So they've got almost 70 years worth of material that they can reprint for free.
Right.
And let's face it, Mad's a nostalgic sort of a thing, and most of the people that buy it and read it are fans of have been longtime fans of the magazine. Right. So basically, I think DC just decided, well, let's just give them what they want. We'll just reprint old stuff and have a little bit of new stuff in there to sort of justify it, and see if we can keep the subscription levels where they're at. Because actually, Mad sells not too bad. It's in the 120,000, 130,000 copies an issue. That's quite a bit. That's a lot more than a lot of comic books sell. So, if they can slash the cost down to nothing, I mean, the staff at Mad is like a fraction of what it used to be. Yeah. There's like 3 people on staff now. And so those costs are cut way down, and the cost of the actual content is way down, and they dropped newsstand distribution, which was very expensive to do. So it's all direct market stuff now and or subscription. So they've streamlined it, and I think as long as they keep it in the black, I don't see why they'd stop. The only way that they change it is if people say, we're not buying this anymore because there's not enough new stuff, and then they'd have to rethink it. But the only way I see Mad coming back as a fully new content magazine is if DC licensed it out to another publisher to publish it.
Interesting.
Which is exactly what Marvel did.
True. I was wondering though, what about you mentioned like the parody books you were doing, like the Superman one and the Goodnight Batman and things like that. Are those done, or because those have a longer shelf life, those type of things? So do you foresee any of those coming back in the future? Any new projects like that?
Well, I think Mad's a very valuable brand, like what you said, and book collections and things like that are always going to be viable for making money.
Right.
So I think you can probably expect to see that type of thing. Even with Mad now being 80% reprinted material, you're still going to see, Mad about Star Wars or whatever.
Well, I'm thinking of like your book parodies that are all brand new material that never appeared in the magazine.
Yeah. I don't know. I know Goodnight. I know Goodnight Batcave sold really well.
Batcave,
that was Goodnight Batcave. That book was very popular and it sold pretty well. The other two I don't think did as well. And we were actually had another one that they were pitching called Where the Wonder Things Are. That was going to be a parody of Where the Wild Things Are, but with Wonder Woman. And I actually did a 2-page spread for the pitch, and DC passed on it. They're like, nah, I think we're done with these kids' book things. But who knows?
Do you think it might come back since there's a new Wonder Woman film coming out in a few months?
Maybe. Yeah. I think it would be. I thought it was a great idea. Yeah. I liked the little piece of art that I did for it was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And I didn't read the whole script because I just got that little snippet. But I thought it was a good concept, and I thought they would go for it because not only was Wonder Woman really big at the time because that movie had just come out and had been a huge hit, but I mean, it was the whole girl empowerment thing was a big movement at the time in comics, and this was just right in the wheelhouse for what was really popular at the time, and but I guess they didn't think the numbers worked or whatever. Who knows?
And what do you think the likelihood is? Like, there's big hardback collections of, various Mad Stars, Tom Richmond collection.
That'll be well down the road, I think.
I think you deserve one. I think it would be fine. You already have, a Drucker one, and there's a Davis one, and a Martin one, and, Aragonus, and a couple others. Jacobs even got one, one of those hardback editions. But, I guess you don't make decisions on such things, so.
No, I can think of a good solid dozen artists right off the top of my head, that would deserve a book well before I do. That's for sure. But who knows? You never know.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, I guess, we've gone over an hour, so that's very good. And I appreciate your time. Sure. Is there anything you'd like to plug or promote at this time?
Well, yeah, actually, since MAD very specifically decided, or DC very specifically decided that they were not going to do movie and TV parodies anymore in MAD. That was something that I was flat out told that's something that they're not going to do anymore as part of the new stuff. Des Devlin, the writer, longtime writer for MAD, and I are going to do a book of movie parodies.
Oh, cool.
We're going to do a Kickstarter of it, and it's going to we're shooting for a Kickstarter release date of the 1st of April Fool's Day, fittingly. And it's going to be a book full of movie and TV parodies, ones that are new movies that are just coming out, and also a few classic movies that never got the MAD treatment.
Cool.
So look for that to be announced probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and hopefully we'll make that happen, because I think that's a genre that deserves to continue.
Mm-hmm. And are you making any other appearances? I know you had to cancel a recent one that probably was happening today in Seattle, and I understand
next weekend,
yeah. So, barring anything current, is there any appearances like in the summer or fall of this year?
Yeah, I'll be at San Diego Comic-Con.
Okay.
There every year. Just follow the crowd to where Sergio is, and I'll be at the table across the hallway from him. And then I'm supposed to be at WonderCon next month, but we'll see what happens with that one.
Right.
And I'm at New York Comic-Con every year. I don't do a lot of shows. Comic-Cons are, a lot of fun, but they're exhausting, and it takes me out of the studio for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I always end up just really having to scramble to get caught up when I get back. And so I pick and choose my shows. But so I'll be at a few. And if they reschedule Emerald City for this summer, hopefully the dates will work and I can actually do that one, because that's a good show. And so, yeah, I'll be at a few this summer. And you can always just go to my website, tomrichmond.com. I've got a little page that just lists where I'm going to be and what the dates are. Mm-hmm. All that info.
And then other things you do, like you do commissions and sell prints and things like that?
At the Comic-Cons I do. I don't do very many commissions like through the mail.
Okay.
Because I'm just too busy with, publication work. Even though MAD is, a smaller part of that now, I still do work for, I do a lot of work for Jeff Dunham, the comedian. Mm-hmm. A lot of his product illustration and everything. I've usually got 1 or 2 projects with him on the board. I do work for other magazines. I do stuff for advertising and, freelancing all along the way. So I usually stay busy. But so at the shows is when I do, sketch covers and caricatures of people and mad blank covers and that sort of thing. It's a lot of fun to do that.
Mm-hmm. And I should have asked this earlier, but I just escaped. How long does it take to do, like, the average movie or TV parody? Since you said it takes a while.
It takes about 3 days a page.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because it takes me a good day to pencil it out, and that includes all the research I have to do. you know, digging up references and all that other kind of stuff. And then, you know, data ink it, data color it probably. I can do it a little faster than that if I have. That's mostly a function of endurance as opposed to speed. Like, I can't speed up any faster than I work, so I just end up staying up all night
Oh, jeez.
to get them done. But yeah, about 3. So a 6-page parody take about, you know, 2 weeks to 18 days to do. So it's very time consuming. A lot of likenesses, a lot of, you know.
So how big is this? How big is this Kickstarter book then? If it has a bunch of parodies.
We're starting it out with a target of 8, probably 6 to 8 page parodies, and then we'll have stretch goals that'll probably bring it up to as many as a dozen. But I think that's it, because we're going to have a deadline. You know,
and that's a lot of work. Okay.
Yeah, I only have so long to be able to do it all. I mean, we've already started it. The first parody is The Rise of Skywalker, and when we launch the Kickstarter, we'll show the splash page for it, and which is all finished, and Des has already written it, and we're already working on the second one. So, you know, hopefully things will work out with the Kickstarter, and we'll make it happen.
All right, very good. Well, I thank you, Tom, for being my podcast guest and updating me on the world of Mad and everything else that you do.
My pleasure.
All right, and thank you very much.
Thank you for listening, and thank you, Tom Richmond, for being my special guest. Episode number 71 will be coming soon. If you would like to comment and or be a guest on this podcast, please drop me a line at funideas.mark@gmail.com. Become a Patreon of Mark Arnold and Fun Ideas Productions. If everyone listening just contributed $1 a month, that would be a tremendous help in continuing the production of my books and this podcast. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel. The opening and closing music for the Fun Ideas podcast is provided courtesy of Andrew the Slow Poisoner Goldfarb and is used with permission. This has been the Fun Ideas podcast. This is Mark Arnold speaking. This episode is copyright 2020, Fun Ideas Productions. Thank you, and good night.
Pills in the pink electric church. The final flicker of your lewd jeweled boob to